My mom treated me like a maid for years because I resemble my biological father. Now she's demanding a share of the inheritance he left me, despite making my life hell. I'm 21 now, and I've endured the harshest punishment for looking like my biological father. I'm the product of my mom's infidelity. My mom was married to my stepdad for 10 years and has 3 daughters. Mandy, 26, Cece, 24, and me, 21. My stepdad didn't know I wasn't his child. As I grew older, I started looking more and more like my biological father, and my stepdad grew suspicious. My older sisters resembled Mom, so he never questioned their origins, but I looked completely different. Eventually, he conducted a paternity test for all 3 of us. The results revealed that only Mandy was his biological child. Cece and I had different fathers. That's when Mom confessed that each of us had a different father. My stepdad filed for divorce. He paid child support for Mandy only, leaving Mom to provide for Cece and me on her own. Mom loved Mandy and Cece because they looked like her, but she hated me because I was a living reminder of her infidelity. As a child, I couldn't understand her anger. She was cheerful and nurturing with my sisters, but with me, she was always dissatisfied and irritated. I can't recall a single happy moment with her. The worst part was that I didn't know why she treated me this way for so long, and when I finally found out, I was devastated. The truth only made things worse. I went through an identity crisis and realized Mom despised me, and there was nothing I could do about it. I couldn't even complain about her neglect. She'd say Cece's father and mine had abandoned us. But at least Cece looked like her, so Mom found it easier to care for her, while I reminded her of my biological father, and she loathed me for it. Mom and my sisters manipulated Mandy's issues, with Mom calling herself the only legitimate childbearer, insulting me and blaming me for the divorce. Even Cece mocked me, saying I looked like my father and that I'd ruined our family. She'd say, "Why couldn't you look like Mom? Then Dad wouldn't have left us," as if I had a choice. As a child, I hated myself, my blue eyes because Mom and my sisters had brown ones, my nose, my lips. I hated my very existence. This treatment lasted for years. I rarely got new clothes. I had to wear Mandy and Cece's hand-me-downs. They didn't buy me toys, and I wasn't allowed to play with other kids' toys either. I was a free maid, fetching water and food, washing dishes, doing their laundry, making their beds. The only decent thing Mom did was send me to school, a regular public school, but at least she didn't deny me an education. When I was 13, I ran away from home, but the police found me and brought me back. I told them I didn't want to return, but they didn't listen. Mom sobbed in front of the officers, claiming she was a single mother raising 3 daughters, and I was just a troubled child jealous of my sisters. I listed everything I'd been through, but when the police asked if Mom had physically hit me, I said no, and they lost interest. Mom said, "See? I told you she's just jealous." Emotional abuse wasn't considered a crime. The officers patted my head, told me to be a good girl, and left. After that, Mom and my sisters hated me even more. Staying home became unbearable, so I started working odd jobs, babysitting for neighbors, mowing lawns, working at a video store, just to spend less time at home. Earning money was better than free labor for my family. During that time, I began to rebel. I earned my own money, stopped tolerating their humiliation, stopped eating at home, and bought my own food. Life started improving. I could buy things for myself, even better stuff than my sisters had. Cece softened a bit, but Mandy kept bullying me, tearing my clothes, breaking my makeup, throwing out my belongings. I had to endure it silently. I wanted to save up and escape, but my boss at the video store advised me to finish school to get a better job later. He said his son worked at a recruiting firm and could help me find a sales position after graduation. So I gathered my strength and focused on school. The day I graduated, I packed my things and left. I got a job in sales, started earning money, and gradually built my life. Mom wanted me to come back home. She showed up at my workplace multiple times, trying to convince me to move back. Not out of love, but for money. She said I could pay her instead of paying rent elsewhere and live with them. I laughed in her face. Living there for free was hell, and now she wanted me to pay for it? She must be joking. I wanted to meet my biological father, but Mom refused to tell me about him. I asked Cece if she knew her father. She said Mom told her he didn't want to meet her, so it was better not to look for him. Mom told me the same about my father. I suspected she was lying and kept pressing her, but she wouldn't budge. 2 years ago, she couldn't pay her mortgage and desperately needed money. She asked me for a loan. I said I'd give her money only if she told me who my father was. She gave me just a name, nothing else. I demanded an address. She claimed he didn't want to see me, so there was no point in looking. I refused the money until I got full information. Finally, she gave me an address, 30 hours away by car, or a flight with 2 layovers. I saved up for a ticket, went to the address, and it was wrong. I came back and confronted her, threatening to sue for withholding information. She claimed she gave the wrong address because his family didn't know about me, and my showing up would ruin his life, accusing me of being a homewrecker. After heated arguments, she gave me another address, 4 hours away by car, but kept insisting he'd ignore me. I didn't listen, took a bus and went. Meeting my father was the most surreal moment of my life. I didn't even have to introduce myself. He looked at me and said, "Well, hello, my girl," then hugged me. It was the warmest embrace I'd ever gotten from a family member. I learned something that turned my world upside down. My biological father had been paying child support for me all these years. Mom deliberately gave me the wrong address so I wouldn't find out, lying to both of us. She told him I hated him and didn't want to see him. It turned out his family indeed didn't know about me. He admitted he'd been married for 40 years, had 2 grown sons, and loved his wife deeply, so he didn't want to ruin his marriage. Mom used this to blackmail him for money. He said we could meet if I wanted and he'd help me, but he didn't want his family to know about me. I didn't like that. If he wasn't ready to acknowledge me openly, what was the point? I stopped seeing him. He wrote to me a few times, but I didn't respond. About 6 months ago, he showed up at my workplace. He apologized and said he wanted to make amends. I told him he owed me nothing. I'm not a child anymore and don't need help. But he said meeting me made him unable to live with the lie anymore. He told his family about me. His sons, already adults with their own lives, took the news calmly, but his wife was in shock and they're now in therapy. Then he handed me a document, a deed to a mansion. He said it was the least he could do to make up for his absence. I asked if his family knew and he said yes, they did. He'd already paid for his son's education, they were set, and he left his wife their house and set up trust funds for them. The mansion was for me. I was stunned. I had no idea he was wealthy. I didn't want his money, otherwise, I could have blackmailed him like Mom did all those years. I told him what I'd been through because I looked like him. He said, "I'm sorry you had to go through that." He hadn't known. Mom fed him a completely different version of my life. He gave me the house to secure my future, feeling obligated to do so. I didn't tell anyone about the house. Lately, I'd been thinking about going to college. I always wanted a higher education but couldn't afford it. With the mansion, I figured I could rent it out and use the money for school. That's how Mom found out my father gave me the house. Now she's chasing me, demanding her share, manipulating me by saying I ruined her marriage and forced her into divorce, so I owe her. When I refused, she threatened to sue, claiming she has rights to my father's property. I don't know how inheritance and property laws work, but I suspect she has no case. Still, knowing how U.S. laws can be, who knows? I don't have money for a lawyer until I start earning rental income. If anyone understands this, please help. I really need advice. Call me foolish, but I'm genuinely desperate. Thank you all. Update 1. Thanks for the help. As many of you pointed out in the comments, Mom can't claim a share of the house my father gave me. So, the next time she showed up demanding her part, I went on the offensive. She threatened to sue, but I told her to do whatever she wanted. She had no leverage except yelling, and yell she did, like she'd been wounded. After that confrontation, there was a long period of silence, and I didn't speak to any of them. I occasionally ran into Cece since she works in the same area as me. Seeing how my life improved after meeting my biological father, Cece forced Mom to reveal who her father was. Unfortunately, her father turned out to be a German man who'd long since returned to his homeland. He'd lived nearby years ago, renting a room from our neighbors while a student, and got mom pregnant. When he learned she was pregnant and would demand child support, he fled. Cece contacted him via email, and he admitted everything. They now keep in touch, but Cece is upset because finding her father didn't bring any benefits. It's interesting, did she want a father, or was she just hoping for a jackpot? I signed a contract with an agency to find a tenant for the mansion. 6 days ago, they called me. The agent said he'd brought a potential renter to see the house, but 2 women were already living there. I was shocked. The women claimed they were the owners and kicked the renters out. The agent revealed he'd already brought 2 or 3 potential tenants over the past month, but they all disappeared after visiting. I asked for photos of the women, and, of course, it was Mom and Mandy. I drove there immediately and, without a word, started throwing their stuff out. They tried to stop me, begging, "Wait, we can explain, please listen." I shouted that I wasn't listening to imposters. In that neighborhood, where everyone knows each other, the commotion drew neighbors, who called the police. I didn't have the house deed on me, but the agent had a copy and showed it. The police kicked Mom and Mandy out but advised me to arrange security for the house. I asked if I could get a restraining order against them. They said it'd be difficult since Mom and Mandy have no criminal record, and this was their first incident, so they'd just get a warning. I called my father and told him everything. I didn't have money for security yet, so he took over, saying he'd install extra cameras, there was only one before, and find tenants, as I had no idea how rental agreements worked. I haven't heard from the imposter since. Whether that'll last, I'm sure they'll be back. Update 2. 2 weeks after that incident, Mom and Mandy showed up at my door again, looking pitiful. They said they were homeless. Mom lost her job, they hadn't paid rent for 2 months, and were evicted. They claimed they had nowhere to go, which is why they tried moving into my mansion. After being kicked out, they'd been drifting. They begged me to let them live in the house for at least a month. I was exhausted after a long workday and didn't want to deal with them. I told them my father now handles the house and I'm no longer involved, so I couldn't help. They pleaded with me to talk to Dad and convince him to let them stay, pestering me until I snapped. Mom suddenly recalled her heroic feat of raising me, playing the pity card. "I raised you for 18 years, can't you do something for me? I raised you alone, and this is how you treat me." I exploded. "Yes, you raised me, not as a daughter, but as a maid. I was nothing more than free labor for you 3. Did you ever buy me new clothes, something of my own? Everything I had was Mandy and Cece's leftovers. I ate scraps while you had proper meals. I got cold leftovers. I did all the housework, but you never showed me an ounce of care. Even when I was sick, you didn't bother with medicine unless I was deathly ill. Once, you even gave me pills I was allergic to. I could have died, but you never cared about my existence. That's how you raised me." I continued, "And the funniest part, it's not even my fault. How can I be blamed for looking like my father? You cheated on your husband, you got pregnant by who knows who, and I had to suffer for it." I unleashed years of pain, hatred, and resentment. They started crying. I broke down too, not for them, but for everything I'd endured. They tried to comfort me, but I just told them to leave. They thought I'd soften after venting and let them stay, but I only screamed, "Get out! I don't want to see you again." After they left, I felt so awful that I went to the doctor the next day and spent a couple of days in bed. 3 days later, feeling bored, I decided to drive around town. Passing Mom's house, I saw it was boarded up, with their belongings scattered outside. I know a girl from their neighborhood, so I called her to ask what happened. She said Mom got into serious trouble. She'd been sleeping with the landlord, and his wife found out. Furious, the wife dragged Mom out by her hair and threw her out. Apparently, Mom hadn't paid rent for over a year, paying the landlord in her own way. It's a small town. Everyone knows each other. I hate saying this because she's my mother, but this woman, I don't even know how to describe her. Some might think the story sounds absurd, but believe me, not everyone has a normal family. Some are like mine. As I mentioned, my father took over finding a tenant for the house. With that money, I enrolled in college, not the most prestigious, but I'm proud of myself for reaching this point. Meanwhile, Mom tried to seduce my biological father, but he kicked her out and threatened to call the police if she came near my mansion again. After our last confrontation, I haven't heard from her. Cece occasionally messages me. That's how I learned Mandy ditched Mom too. She married a widower from the next block with 2 kids. He has a big house and inherited property. Of course, Mom passed her talents to Mandy. Good for them, let them live as they please.